And I'm going to put this in the middle so I don't knock over it.
What was that direction?
Stand up again. If that's available for you. It might not be.
Stand over here.
And if you want to spread out and go back into the carpet area back there, we have a little bit more space. That's great. So imagine that we have hummingbirds, and we have little strings around our wrists, and the hummingbirds have the string in their mouths. And so they fly up, and so when they fly up, our arms lift up. So have the feeling of it being effortless, not that it's coming from an internal effort, but it's coming from these hummingbirds lifting up your arms. And then they fly straight up so that they go straight up over your head. And then once they're over the head, then they pull out to the side so that the arms come out. So effortless effort. And again, when they come down, they pull up again in front, straight up. And when it gets over your head, then they pull out to the side. And then down. And one more time, up. So effortless effort has a different feeling on the body than us trying to do it. And sometimes we can notice it's available. Effortless effort, as we have our furry friend panting outside the window, disappointed that she's not allowed to play because she really thinks she's a person. Okay, so now gently swaying. And allow your hands to tap your shoulders and your back. And slowing down. Coming into stillness. Now, if your tummy's not too full, let's see what happens if we interlock our hands and push up to the sky. And again, up to the sky. And one more time, push up to the sky. And then bending at the midsection, leaning forward. And pushing down towards the floor. And over to the right. And over to the left. And now pointing your toe up and brushing your leg down. And patting. And the other side. Brushing in. And patting. So now let's do the eight standing postures, or the different standing postures. And with the standing postures, what we want to do is we want to use the chi to help us with the posture. So we want to use less will and more chi. So let's just start by rubbing our hands together. And now using our hands as kind of like energetic magnets, just to help with the breathing and letting the chi flow from our feet, from the lovely fertile earth around us, up and then down. Breathing in, the chi moves up. Breathing out, it moves down. Breathing in, it moves in from our feet, up our legs into our central channel, comes up over our forehead, down the tongue at the roof of the mouth into the central channel, goes through the perineum, into the legs, into the earth. Up on the in-breath, down with the out-breath. Breathing in and out. And so now just allowing your hands to rest by your side and continue with the breathing in and out. Filling yourself up with energy on the in-breath and releasing, relaxing, letting go on the out-breath. So we can take the chi from the quinces and the tomato and the pumpkin and the fruit trees and the roses, the lavender and the rosemary, and we can let it all come in our in-breath and let it feed and nourish us. And on the out-breath, we can make the intention to release everything that doesn't serve, is not supportive of joy. Let it release and turn into beautiful, fertile compost that is life-affirming and life-serving to everything that it touches. Breathing in, life force. Breathing out, what no longer serves. And now allowing the arms to float up so that the same kind of effortless effort as the hummingbirds pulling on a string. Allowing the hands to float up until the hands are at a collarbone height. The fingers are pointing towards each other. The elbows are pointing down. And the arms are rounded like in a tree, hugging a nice, big, old oak tree. And so we want to bend our knees slightly and squat if that's available to us. Our weight is balanced front and back and side to side. And this posture, standing like a tree, is a really important posture. So we want our back to be straight. So we want to tuck our sitting bones under and elongate our spine and open our arms so that there's this rounding, nice rounding, elbows down. And we continue with the breathing with the breath coming in through the bottom of our feet, uplifting and nourishing and holding up the arms, relaxing the eyes and behind the eyes and the jaw. Relaxing the shoulders and the back, relaxing the abdomen and the pelvic floor, so that the pelvic floor and the perineum can descend, can really soften and open. Breathing in this sweet, fresh, fragrant, bubbly, lovely energy. Breathing out what no longer serves, what is stale or stagnant. Now turning the hands so that they form a triangle and looking through and just noticing everyone and everything that's in this space. Continuing to breathe. Breathing in, new, fresh, fragrant, energetic, alive air. Breathing out the residue of the smoke, what is stale, stagnant, the fog, drizzles. Now, opening up the hands and moving towards the heaven and just feeling what's available as we tune into the sky, to the heavens, to the air. Does that feel lighter? Does it feel a force of blessing? What is available? Does it just hurt your shoulders more? What's available? And again, continuing to breathe and allowing the life force to come through your feet and up, and hold up your arms, your hands. And breathing out, relaxing behind the eyes, relaxing the chewing muscles, the smiling muscles, and relaxing your shoulders. Opening up, relaxing the abdomen and the perineum. Turning one foot in and the other foot out. Leaning forward on the bent foot, allowing the hands to form a very soft fist, opening up the chest. And this is a warrior pose. There's a certain amount of badassery that's needed in this practice. The intention to say yes to joy and to life and to energy, to health. Physical health and mental health. It takes some guts and persistence. It takes some effort, sustaining effort. Pushing through your feet, relaxing your hips and your pelvis, turning one foot in and the other foot out, bending your knee, leaning forward on the other side. And so as much as it is challenging to say yes to life, it's also challenging to say no to harm, to the critical mind, to self-judgment, to the ways that we abandon and shame ourselves, betray ourselves, walk out on ourselves. So we say, no, it is enough. This does not yield anything positive. We take a stand. And it takes fierceness. Grit, tenacity, effort, sustaining power. Pushing through the legs, both feet coming forward, walking the feet in so that they're about shoulders width apart, allowing the hands to soften and feeling our connection with the earth. Earth, she has held us every single step we have ever taken. She's fed us every single meal we've ever eaten, and everything that we've ever drunk, she's provided. She's received our tears, our urine, and our excrement. She's cradled us at night when we've slept. Mother Earth, living and breathing right here with us now. Continuing with the breath, allowing the in-breath to come in through the feet, move up. And relaxing, releasing, and letting go on the out-breath. Relaxing muscle tension behind the eyes and the chewing muscles, the smiling muscles, the neck, in the abdomen, softening in the pelvic floor and the perineum. Emptying the legs. Breathing in our rich, nourishing life force. Breathing out what is stale, spent, what no longer serves. Circling around, allowing our fingers to point towards each other, right around our abdomen, our lower abdomen, making that rounded arms like we're hugging a tree. This is feeling ourself having been in relationship with the world. Feeling our breath expanding and contracting. With each in-breath, it expands. With each out-breath, there's a contraction of the abdomen, of the chest. Filling up on the in-breath, bright energy, relaxing, releasing, and letting go on the out-breath. For women, allowing your right hand to touch your lower abdomen and your left hand to come over. If you're male or male identified, it's the opposite. And so let's rub our hands together. Pulling the energy, the chi that's all around us into our hands. And now let it pour in through the ears. Pour, 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 pour. Pouring in. Touching your elbows and weaving an energetic field in front, in front, in front. All the way down, and if you can reach the floor, touching the feet, mixing with the heaven energy, reaching up, and then letting this cascade and wash and cleanse outside and inside. This exercise, this Celtic Weave by Donna Eden, is fabulous for any of us who are super, super sensitive and find city life really challenging. So it's something to do before leaving the house or before going into a challenging meeting or when you've just been bombarded or before you are bombarded with something that you anticipate is going to be difficult. Let it pour in and then weaving. Weaving, 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 weaving. Creating a protective barrier, mixing earth energy, heaven energy, and letting it wash and cleanse. And one more time. Letting it pour in, pour in, pour in. Touching elbows, weaving, weaving in the front. mixing earth and heaven, and letting it pour around, back and front, in and out, cleansing, protecting, and nourishing. And now just this gentle rainfall of chi, starting with the head and the forehead and the neck and the face and the chest and the arms and the back, legs and feet, as much as one can. And now bringing one's hands together again and just opening eyes and looking at all of us, this group of people, our family of rewirers for joy, all here together and in the space, bringing everyone who's not able to join us today. Judy, John, Terry. Who else is there?
Amanda.
Ashley.
Ashley and Amanda. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Don't give her the attention.
I know. It's hard. Sorry.
So this whole course is built around the Satipatthana Sutta,
No.
the foundations of mindfulness. And what we have been studying is that this sutta, the foundations of mindfulness, is really central in the Buddha's teaching and instruction. It gives us very specific instructions on how to track our experience, as well as frames of reference in relating to them. And as we understand how to work with the foundations of mindfulness, we learn how to shift the aperture of awareness from being focused on external sounds and stimulus, what people say and do, and what is going on in the world around us, to an internal aperture of awareness, of noticing our body sensations, our feelings, and our responses to those feelings. The refrain in the Satipatthana Sutta, knowing inside and knowing outside, encourages the constant flow between these two aperture openings of awareness. So learning to do this and apply the entirety of the foundations of mindfulness is a lifelong study. I think if we were to stay with this topic for 10 years, we still would not get to the end of it. It's really rich, very deep, and has many, many, many layers to it. So in the application of this, what we're doing is we pause ourselves and refocus the aperture of awareness from external stimuli to internal experience. We drop in and we track our responses. So our capacity to do that is directly connected to our ability to respond appropriately to what's arising. And this is the essence of our work as a meditation practitioner, and the forms the basis of our effectiveness in our ability to practice. When we look at an overview of the foundations of mindfulness, we can see that it is a complete path. What this means is that if this was the only thing that we ever did was practice the foundations of mindfulness by itself, it is sufficient to take us to the release of suffering. When we see how powerful it is, we can motivate us to be diligent about putting it into practice. So just as a brief review, I want to just mention some of the things that we've been talking about. The Satipatthana Sutta contains different meditation objects, starting with many different ways of focusing on the body. The body-focused objects include the breath, the postures, activities, anatomical parts, elements, contemplations of the body in various states of decay. So originally, when I was thinking about this course, and we had the Daylong, I had shaped it up that I was going to spend today, this morning, thinking about death and having us go through death meditation. But I somehow thought, with everything that's going on for everyone, that maybe factors of awakening in the morning and afternoon might be better. We can handle death another time. But the thing about death is, even though it can be challenging, when we actually wrap our minds around it in the right way, when we actually come to terms with death, it opens up the portal for joy. So it is directly connected. And there's a process of getting to the joy. So the increased sensitivity that develops from focusing on the body, and the increased capacity to see that the body is not a solid, unchanging entity, prepares the mind to focus on the next satipatthana, the next foundation, feeling. At the level of Vedana, or feeling, the instruction is to notice the pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral quality, and to see it as either worldly or unworldly Vedana. For example, if the pleasant sensation is arising from lunch, it's in the worldly category. But if the pleasant Vedana is arising from loving kindness or the mind accessing stillness, it's unworldly. So this distinction between worldly and unworldly helps us focus attention on the ethical dimensions of Vedana, and supports bringing attention to the wholesome or unwholesome component of the next satipatthana, the contemplation of mind. So it goes from body to feeling to mind. When we look at the satipatthana related to the mind, there are 4 unwholesome states of mind that are listed: lust, anger, delusion, and distraction, followed by 4 wholesome states. Contemplating the 4 wholesome states allowed us to consider the hindrances, the obstacles to accessing these wholesome states of mind. These are desire, anger, sloth, torpor, restlessness, and doubt. So in terms of the logic of the way the Satipatthana is laid out, it follows that contemplating the hindrances is the first group of dhammas that are listed in the 4th foundation. Contemplation of the hindrances is followed by attention to the aggregates, the sense spheres, and both of these are a deeper way to let the me that is identified to be seen and dissolve. And this is followed by the awakening factors of mindfulness, maintaining awareness of reality, investigation of the nature of reality, energy, also known as determination, effort, joy, rapture, relaxation, and tranquility of body and mind, concentration, a calm one-pointedness of mind or clear awareness, and equanimity to accept reality as it is without craving or aversion. So the culmination of the Satipatthana, the fulfillment of it, is the contemplation of the Four Noble Truths. And this contemplation is designated in realization. It's designed to culminate in realization. So realization of the Four Noble Truths is really the direct understanding of the deathless. It's the direct understanding and the experience of what is timeless, what is deathless, what is unconditioned, and to see that truths that are not dependent on conditions can exist even when things going on around us are not so easy or can be very challenging. So to have direct perception of the deathless then changes the way that we would focus on the stuff that's coming up in our experiences. So we could no longer believe with the same tenacity that we exist as a separate, unchanging entity that we do when we feel ourselves as solid and separate. So the Satipatthana leads progressively to from more coarse to more subtle levels. And there's a sutta, having investigated the body, the meditator searches for the causes for attachment to it, which is found to be pleasant feeling. when you then ask who experiences this feeling, this leads to an investigation of the mind. And the investigation of the mind leads to the causes and the conditions of mind, which leads to the various groupings of the Dhamma.
Is there food under there?
Chocolate, no good for dogs.
True. Talking about death, huh?
Yes.
Chocolate.
For dogs.
Death by chocolate, right?
So the Satipatthana is sort of designed to lay things out in a sequential way, and even though the awareness tends to move from coarse objects to subtle objects, the primary characteristic of awareness is to be with whatever's arising as it is occurring. So, not to confuse the map with the territory, there's going to be times when it's not like that. And we just need to understand how it is how it is, even if it doesn't fit the picture. That's really important. So if we go then from the overview of the Satipatthana into the specifics of the factor of awakening, we've got them written up here, okay? So the factors of awakening can have like a big deal name, it feels like it's a really big thing. But in reality, these qualities are showing up in our daily life all of the time. It begins with mindfulness. Mindfulness is kind of like the kingpin. It's the capacity to bring sustained attention to what's arising, to see things, to ponder them, to consider without becoming identified with what is seen. It's the axis mundi around which the other factors of awakening coalesce. So one of the things that the Buddha has said is that there is nothing so detrimental as unwise attention. Okay? So when we have unwise attention, we can get into all kinds of rabbit holes and difficulty, trouble, with even the simplest things that are arising. And he said that there's nothing so beneficial as wise and skillful attention. And so Richard was talking last time we met about the fact that hindrances is really only related to whether or not there's wise or unwise attention. If there's wise attention, it's not a hindrance, it's just an object of meditation. And so when we have wise attention, when we have mindfulness, then the hindrances cease to be hindrances, they cease to be obstacles, and they become objects of meditation. So if we take the loftiness of this and kind of reduce it to something simple, let's look at the factors of awakening when we drive. So in the first part, when we're keeping our attention on the road, we're not getting distracted by too many things that we hear or receive with the conversations in our passengers. So a certain amount of attention is just happening with we're keeping our focus on the road and our hands on the steering wheel. So even though there's a lot that's going on, attention is focused on the road and the wheel. That's mindfulness. Investigation is interest or curiosity. It's the ability to wonder, to look at things from different perspectives, to distinguish the bigger picture. And so with investigation, when we are constantly making choices about the condition of the road, the steering, when to accelerate, when to brake, when to change lanes, we're bringing that factor into our mind as we're navigating those particular choices. What's needed right now? Okay? Energy is the effort that we apply. It's the effort to sit up, it's the effort to focus, it's the effort to pay attention, it's the effort to come to a Daylong retreat. When driving, it's the effort to steer, it's the effort to focus, it's the effort to stay awake on longer trips or to get home after our Wednesday night class. Energy and investigation can combine when we're on a road trip going to a new place and we're both curious and energized with all of these new sights. Okay? Or like if you're test driving a new car, So I'm going to need a new car. I've got 210,000 miles on my car. And so I'm starting to look at cars. And, that's a big thing for me, looking at a car. So I'm imagining test driving a car is going to be a really big thing. So joy is the underpinning thing that we're constantly wanting to turn back to. Yeah. And so the uplift and well-being that we can feel, tranquility is a relaxed and easy, calm state of mind. Both of these is not ordinarily what we associate with driving, okay? We don't normally think of driving in joy. But when we think about driving to the beach or a trip in the countryside or, you know, the ability to have a nice adventure, then maybe then it's accompanied with joy, yeah? And I remember I was on my way to Santa Rosa to look after my mom, and the traffic was terrible, and I was just doing laughing yoga all the way up in the traffic. And so in spite of the fact that it was gridlock or it was really slow, I was having a great time. So concentration is the ability to stay focused on the challenge. So when we're driving and we have to change 3 lanes, I can't talk to somebody when I'm changing 3 lanes. I'm not yet able to do that. So I stop the conversation and I just focus on what's happening and who's coming and is it going to be okay and can I get off quickly enough and easily enough. So when I've changed the lanes or when we've gotten through the roadblocks or, you know, at night, you know, people crossing the crosswalks is another thing. It's like I can't see them very well. And so I'm just really focused, you know, is anybody in the crosswalk, especially everybody likes to wear black. So they wear black, they don't have any lights on, and they're almost completely invisible, you know? It's just like, oh, goddess, you know? So it's like, okay, so I got through the crosswalk, and then my attention relaxes a little bit more so that I'm not so vigilant. Equanimity is the even-mindedness when things may be evocative. So we can see it when somebody takes the parking spot when we've been waiting for, and we think, oh, there'll be another one. How many of you, that's your first thought when somebody steals your parking spot?
Oh, there'll be another one?
I don't think so.
Or when there's a traffic jam, and instead of focusing on the fact that we're not moving, we turn our attention, we focus on the sky, you know? Just look at the clouds and look at the birds, you know? So it's right there. The sky is always right there, you know? It's just we get locked into like the and then we forget to look at the sky, you know.
Form and formless.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What did you say?
Form and formless.
Yep.
The sky is the formless, and everything else is form in front of you in the highway.
So the equanimity is the ability to be present and not get caught by desire or aversion when circumstance that evoke them arise. So mindfulness is the one quality that allows us to determine the presence or absence of the other factors of awakening. And that in itself is a practice of noticing, cultivating the ability to notice. So today, when we did our standing and guided meditation, we were working with the factors of awakening and bringing them into awareness, allowing them to develop, to get stronger, to seeing what was present, what was absent, right there, standing, and again in sitting, you know. So we can make a practice of noticing which of the factors are present right now, which of the factors are absent right now. How many of us are distracted by the sound right now? So just like with the dog barking, you know, we can become curious about, all right, so my attention was focused there. Is there a way that I can reframe this that actually allows me to be curious or helps me feel less distracted? Or somebody steals your parking spot. This is a practice opportunity. Is there a way you can focus your attention so that it doesn't go into the immediate feeling of outrage and pissed offedness, you know? What else can you do with your attention rather than go down that familiar rut? That's investigation. That's curiosity. And then the ability to sustain attention on that new place is mindfulness. How much you can sustain attention is concentration. And when you're effective at doing that, then what you've done is you've created equanimity. So the fact that somebody steals your parking space is not an automatic that you're going to go down into frustration, resentment, anger. You have choices. And how you exercise those choices is going to have an impact on what the result is. So the hindrances as well as the factors of awakening are part of the fourth foundation of mindfulness, being able to see things in terms of categories of Dhamma. They're natural that they arise. It's not that there's anything about them that's not natural. When we identify with greed, ill will, restlessness, sloth, torpor, and doubt, they become hindrances to awakening. But we can use the factors of awakening as balancing factors for the hindrances. So on that sign over there, I've got the hindrances in blue on the left. I've got the factors of awakening that are positive that you can use as antidotes in green. And I've got the factors of awakening that are negative in red. So for example, if you have desire or filled with desire, one of the negative things is unwise attention. So depending on how you focus your attention, it's depending on whether or not it's going to get more stimulated or calmed. But if you bring mindfulness, investigation, equanimity, and concentration to the desire, then that will help balance it. So in the positive factors, mindfulness is consistent in all of them. In the negative factors, unwise attention is in all of them, even though I haven't written it in a few because I didn't have enough space. So if we take dullness, for example, the qualities that stimulate energy, investigation, and joy, those are positive factors. But the qualities that are inducing more relaxation and less energy are negative factors. So if you have dullness and you add more curiosity or concentration, then often that exacerbates the dullness. It doesn't balance it out.
You said curiosity.
You have tranquility down here.
Dullness-
Tranquility and concentration is what we have under dullness for the negative.
Oh, tranquility. It's tranquility. That's right. Not investigation. Yeah. Restlessness. If you're restless and you're trying to become curious of restless, that tends to magnify it. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, like when you're feeling doubtful and you put your attention on something that you have confidence in, then that gives you more stability, and then sometimes it helps you to be able to navigate the doubt. So, the factors of awakening, they coalesce to bring about what's needed in order for the mind to open up. So yes, we can see how they are part of our ordinary day. We can see how they are part of driving the car. We can see how they're part of standing or eating or making lunch. They're part of everything. But they're also part of what happens as our mind opens to greater levels of clarity and freedom and release. And so as we are in this practice path, we see various different kinds of joy. We see the joy of moving from dysregulation to regulation, the joy of hindrances falling into abeyance, of becoming calm, of content, the joy of sustaining attention, the joy of different kinds of pleasures. So when we're feeling really agitated and restless, we can't even focus on the beauty of the flowers or the color of the leaves or the fragrance of the rose. And we're so fast eating the food that we don't even taste it. So there's a joy that comes from everything's calming down to be able to enjoy the pleasures that are around us. And then what happens is that we begin to have more capacity to feel the different kinds of Brahma-viharas, the kindness or compassion, the joy, feeling joy in other people's joy, the experience of the mind, understanding and even-mindedness, that we're not moving up and down all over the map. Eventually, the path is designed to lead us to the joy of release. This is the release of feeling that we're solid and separate. This is the release of thinking that satisfaction is somehow an out there activity that we have to obtain. It's the joy of recognizing that the nature of the mind is luminous, loving, clear awareness, and that is available to us independent of the specific conditions that are going on. So, some thoughts, and I welcome your comments, your questions, your...
Is this something that you're gonna send to us, or I could take a picture and write, and
Yeah, why don't we take pictures?
I can
and
take a
mail it
picture
around?
and then send it,
That'd be great.
or make a chart or something.
That'd be awesome.
Okay,
That'd be great.
I'll take
Yeah.
a picture.
That'd be great.
You said that last sentence, you said, the nature of the mind is luminous, loving, and what else?
Clear.
Clear, luminous, radiant, loving awareness.
Thank you.
This is like a prescription.
It is
Isn't
very much like a prescription.
Right, so you have the illness, the hindrance,
That's right.
and you have the cure or the
The
treatment,
medicine. Yeah.
and the, stay away from this.
Contraindication.
Yeah, contraindications, right.
Yeah.
That's why I want to take a picture when I'm
Yes.
feeling restless, so I don't go investigate it. I can see myself doing that. Yeah, that's good.
Restlessness, I think we talked about this the other day. Restlessness is more like kind of a grasping kind of thing, or something like there's not satisfied, or not feeling fulfilled or understood or something. Huh? Is that what restless really means?
I don't have an easy definition. Does somebody else have a good definition of restless?
I just know what it feels like.
Unsettledness.
Yeah,
right?
unsettled.
There's a
Unsettled.
jittery quality to it.
Unsettled,
Yeah.
Unsettled.
And unsatisfactory with what's going on, just.
Or confused.
Mhm.
I like the unsettled, that was good.
Yeah.
I think of it just as a physical quality of not being able to be still.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good one. Yeah.
I, the mind not being able to be still.
Yeah.
The mind not always
Yeah.
looking, thinking.
Seeking.
I'm
Yeah.
familiar
Yes, for
with
me,
it.
it shows up in the body. rather
Unsteady
than the
mind, yeah.
Unsteady mind, grasping.
Seeking something
Yeah,
that's not
seeking,
in the present. Yeah.
It's exhausting.
like seeking a fix or something, something to calm you down or something. Yeah.
Sometimes seeking joy. I find in myself that I'm looking for joy as the antidote to what's going on right now. So I'm like restless.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well if I do that next, that'll make me happy, and then the mind wants to go there, but it's not satisfying. It's just leaping from thing to thing to thing, just to try to find settledness.
So when I hear you say that, I can relate to this sense of the unsatisfactoriness of ordinary, and the grasping on joy and pleasure is somehow the better.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's actually coming out of aversion.
Yeah.
So it looks like it's a movement towards joy, but really what it is an expression of aversion.
That's
Ah,
great.
good one, yeah.
Yeah.
Comments, questions?
I was just curious about the I guess I haven't heard the unwise attention called out as in that way before. I don't know, for whatever reason, it's like a new term for me. And so I'm curious if it's related to like greed, delusion, and aversion, or is it like, I guess I'm having a little bit of a hard time understanding what makes up unwise attention.
So let's talk about lust. Okay, so lust arises, and when there isn't mindfulness around it, then it can overwhelm the mind body, and then unwise attention would be to focus on the things that activate the lust. Okay, if we talk about anger, okay, so somebody stole your parking spot or your bicycle spot.
Which happens a lot less often.
Or your bicycle.
Yes.
And then what happens with unwise attention is there's like a drilling down and a focusing on everything that is justifying why you have a right to feel angry. Okay? That's unwise attention. Wise attention would be to shift it out and think about the things that let your attention shift to something else. Like, this is an opportunity for practice, or I can work with patients, or it's something that is altruistic, or shifting the focus away from the thing that is gripping with that anger. Yeah.
And that's clear to me with anger or ill will. With sensual desire, it's much less clear to me, that distinction. I think partly because it's like, I don't know if this is just my experience, that desire sometimes is simply a state, which might or might not be sparked by an external stimuli. So there, in some ways, turning the mindfulness to that experience in the body has the sense of it. It's just a much less clear distinction to me. I'm not sure, I'm having trouble articulating it. But in some ways, like, turning the attention there seems like it might actually kind of keep it going. And it sometimes it's just not connected to an object. I guess that's where I'm confused, is that I guess my experience is that desire is not always connected to an object. Whereas I see much more clearly how anger is connected to an object.
So in situations where it is connected to an object, then it might be easier to see that there's wise and unwise attention and how to relate to it. When it's not connected to an object, I get it that it's harder to understand what unwise attention would be in that circumstance, because it's not clear what's unwise, because you're not clear what the object is. It's just arising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, so for me, I think it's partly because I think part of how the hindrance of sensual desire works for me is sometimes it's a state that is arising to distract me from another state. Like, that's how it works for me. I think of it as the airbag. If there's anything too dangerous in the environment, let's fill the space with desire or arousal, which sometimes can be objectless. And so anyway, it's just it's like a different function. So I'm just like trying to understand how it fits with this piece around unwise attention.
So let's see if we can unpack it. I mean, I'm just making shit up, so let's see what happens. Let's see what happens if we can stay with that. So something's in the space that's unsafe, okay? It's unsafe. And then what happens is the mind starts being preoccupied with sourdough crackers.
Yeah.
Something like that,
Right.
yeah? Okay, so unwise...
But that's an object. And I guess what I'm saying is sometimes the state of desire can be... it's just hard for me to actually identify what the object is.
So, but what I think is happening is that the object that needs to be identified isn't the desire object where it's going to. It's the thing that actually has triggered the fear. Because that's actually the precipitating cause that's giving rise to the desire. So the unwise attention is to be diverted into desire. It doesn't matter that it doesn't have an object. And what is wise attention in that situation is to think, what has made me frightened? And how can I be with that in a way where I'm not just in a reactive pattern around it? That would be my best guess of how to
Right.
use this in that way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that land for you?
Yeah, I think it's just like it's such an ingrained pattern that it's hard for me to see it when it happens. Like it's still something that'll happen to me on retreat. Is sometimes it'll just be like formless desire is just like will just go on for hours. It is somewhat objectless, and a lot of it is avoiding. I mean, my analysis is that I am avoiding difficult emotions in that because it's a pattern. Like it's just a pattern
So-
in my system.
I mean, but it's classic that, you know, when we have, as adult people, you know, when our bodies, after we've been sexually activated, our sexual desire and our desire response is often a mechanism of how do we feed our attachment hungers,
Mm-hmm.
is through sensual desires
Mm-hmm.
and sexual desire. And so maybe what's happening is that there's something in the retreat environment where you're up against the attachment wounding.
Mm-hmm.
And so then what a wise attention would be to somehow move towards touching that and bringing care and nourishment there.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems to me like this whole thing with the desire is like a shadow. It's
Yes.
it's a shadow.
Yes.
It's like
Right.
shadow boxing to get you away from the thing that's actually really what the thing is
Right,
that's causing
right,
the
right.
problem.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm.
Yes.
yeah.
That's right.
And so not recognizing that thing is the unwise attention? I mean, is unwise mean incomplete or?
So I think the unwise attention would be to get lost in whatever the desire thing is, even if it doesn't have an object, to let your
Mhm.
mind focus and fixate on that,
Mm-hmm.
because that's actually not the source of the problem. It's
Right.
the shadow.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Right. It's the shadow of the problem.
It's the shadow of the problem. So wise attention would be to say, oh, I recognize this. This is a shadow. This is actually not where the source is. And so rather than focus on any of it, just see if there's a way of touching what's the source.
Mm-hmm.
And how can I feed myself so that whatever the source is can calm down,
Mm-hmm.
so that I don't have to spend hours in a shadow boxing fight.
Mm-hmm.
I can actually touch what's there or feed. You might not even be able to touch it directly, but there might be a way of self-soothing and offering yourself nourishment or being in some kind of a relational field with something living
Mm-hmm.
that then calms it,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So like for me, when I was in Colorado Springs, just having come out of the monastery, and you know, the story of what happened was unpleasant to the extreme. It was very unfortunate, you know, everything that had gone on. The monks were, anyway, I won't get into it. But there was a lot on my plate, and I was processing as an individual something that was actually enormous and belonging to a collective. It was much bigger than me, you know? And on many levels, you know, from having community to no community, from having support to no support, from, you know, having the internalized rage towards the feminine being targeted, I mean, just lots of ways. And so I would get into an agitated state, and I would run, literally, to the rocks, run. And when I would lie back and relax in the rocks, I felt nothing I had was going to move them, okay? Nothing. And I knew that. And so I was like, I could relax knowing that I was in a safe space, that whatever I was coming with wasn't going to be upsetting and disturbing and unsettling and dislodge the rocks, okay? So I would relax and calm down, and then whatever it was that was going on for me, I would have more capacity to meet it. But I didn't have the capacity to meet it until I had the resourcing. And so my first step was to get myself resourced, because I absolutely did not have the ability to navigate the intensity of what was going on without being resourced, and I couldn't do it by myself. So there was an intermediate step that was needed, and that intermediate step before I could bring wise attention to what was going on was resourcing. And so for me, the wise effort was to get myself in a place where I could get resourced quick.
Right.
And that led to wise attention, which then led to my ability to deal with whatever it was that was going on.
That sounds like, in resilience training, like Bob Doppel does, he calls that grounding. You know, that's the first thing to do when you're really upset and anxious is ground yourself. You know, that reminds me of the same thing, you know. Just ground, touch the earth, you know.
Yes, 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 Marcy.
It's a phrase that you've used today, and every time I hear it, I go, I want to go there. And the phrase is luminous mind. I love that phrase. And I feel like, yes, I'm sure these are all the steps I need to take, but like, I feel like Dorothy. I want to go home.
That's
And
right.
it's really such a longing
That's
to
right.
be in the state of luminous mind.
That's right.
And I'm thinking, well, have I ever been? Do you remember it? Well, maybe a glimpse here, a glimpse there. But I'm interested in how to be more in that awareness of my luminous mind. And I know these are all important, and I trip all the way along like everybody, and always will, but I still want to know how to keep my awareness of that mind more present to me. Does that make sense? How to do that? Because besides all the grind and stuff of these important steps, which I keep doing, how do I keep that awareness? And like the places I feel it the most are some of the beings I have met along the way, some masters, maybe the Dalai Lama, maybe some of the people I interviewed. There was a radiance and something larger than life about them. And so how does one stay connected to that phenomena? Because I think that's where we're all wanting to be or go or evolve to.
Right.
You know, but I'd like ideas on more access to that.
Well, yes, I mean, that's the $1 million question, is how do we get to where we want to go, you know, to that place of luminous, radiant, loving awareness. And I think that's our path, that's our life, that's our practice. And certainly things like having intensives and hanging out with people where we're talking about this and having meditations that touch it and deal with it. Spending time around people who embody it, who inhabit it, who it's not something that they're talking about, it's something that they live, you know. You know, that's hugely helpful. Having your own portals. So for me, nature is a portal. You know, I can be in a quite a dysregulated state, and I can go to the beach or go to the redwoods, and it's like beam me up, Scotty. You know, it doesn't take long, and I'm there. You know. So each of us needs to find what our portals are and work them. You know, for some, it's relationship. You know, just being around your loving person, whether it's a furry person or a human person. You know, it doesn't matter. What's helpful is just to know what are the access points, and then develop them and set your life up so that you have more contact with those access points more regularly. So for me, that's around, you know, like, what do you really want? So this is where we leverage desire to actually begin to help us shape what do we really want, and then start making choices in a way that maximizes the things that we really want, because I think a lot of us spend a lot of time with urgent stuff that's not at all what we want.
Right.
You know, there's an endless amount of urgent stuff that has nothing to do with what we want.
Yeah.
And so, and usually the stuff that we want is not urgent.
Right.
And so it's constantly getting like whatever.
Constantly distracted. Yeah.
Pushed aside for all
unwise
these
attention.
urgent,
Yeah, unwise
pressing
attention, there you
things
go.
that is not about the stuff that's really important to us. Yes.
Another part comes in is that sometimes I've said, well, that's not a good enough thing. You know, I judge myself for my simple pleasure, my access point, and said it's not enough, but it is. And that might be if it could be working in my garden. That's as good an entry point as anything else. You know, it doesn't, I kept thinking it had to be something grander.
But I think that that's one of the shadows of practice, is that we have this idea that it has to be meditative in a classic, you've got to be on your butt in a meditation ball, in this posture in order for it to count.
Or you have to be, this is my shtick, is that it doesn't count unless you're completely mindful all the time, and if you're not mindful all the time, like in your garden, if you're thinking about other things, well then you get an F. It's like you get an F if you're not like, I'm just, anyway, that's just the way this mind works. It's like you don't, it's like, and that's a judgment, and then that
Judgment,
sets up all this
criticism.
other stuff. Yeah.
No, I mean, for you to, I'm just getting in line.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. If you're not doing
Getting
it
in line for a question. Or,
perfectly, it doesn't count at all. You know, it's like, anyway.
So it's just interesting how we have in us such deep seated senses of what's right, what's wrong, how to practice, what's not
What
practice.
counts?
You know, what's an A, what's an F, and it's like, and it's constant. So even when you're doing something pleasurable, it's like it's in this judgment field about whether it qualifies,
Right.
whether it qualifies to get extracurricular credits
Extra
for
credit.
meditation.
Right.
right. Well, I heard someone give this Dharma talk where they talked about going through these factors as more like water rolling downstream as opposed to some effort of rock climbing to get to the top and touching it. You kind of set up so you can kind of naturally, you kind of learn what will help you kind of naturally roll down and allow this thing to happen to you as opposed to always trying to figure out how you're going to get it.
Good
I don't know if that's
Yeah.
That's a good one.
So the idea of, you know, riding the air currents, you know, so when you're feeling joy, you're riding the air current, and the joy then naturally coalesces some of these other factors with it, and some of the stuff just falls into place, right? So a couple of Wednesdays ago, heaven help me to remember which one, I talked about the Chaitanya Sutta, the effortless effort, you know, and that's where you get it set up and it just sort of unfolds, you know. And then someone came to me and said, effortless effort, you know, you've got to be joking. Because it's like, you know, when I'm in hell realms, there ain't no effortless effort, you know. And so again, we've got this bell curve. So remember the bell curve. And so the effortless effort is on the far end of the bell curve, okay? Most of the time we're in the middle of the bell curve, hopefully, and sometimes we're in the front end, which is the hell realms. And the hell realms, there ain't no effortless effort. It just is not available. It takes a formidable effort when you're in hell realms to get to ordinary suffering, okay? Just ordinary suffering. And then from that, then we have the option of maybe being able to see what this down the waterfall experience of effortless effort, of just having things coalesce together where they're just unfolding, where we don't have landmines everywhere, or as you said, chutes everywhere that just, you step on it and you're back down into hell. You don't have no idea what happened. You take one step and you're back into hell again, you know?
Or you've flown into an area that's been dammed, so you're not gonna.
It doesn't flow.
Can't
So you gotta hike out and start all over again.
Yeah.
You know, which is actually true. You know, we get into eddies and like roadblocks, and we've got to figure out how to get ourselves out and into something else. Yeah.
But isn't that the process about the DO lineage?
Which
you
is
know?
exactly right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. So that's a conceptual framework.
Dependent origination.
Dependent origination. That's the circle that I said. Yeah. That is the framework that describes the path to suffering and the way out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these things are all connected. They're all interwoven. They're not separate, distinct things, but it takes practice and some massaging to figure out how they relate to each other. Can I invite anyone who hasn't said much to speak up?
I think it's that side of the room, isn't it?
Anything?
I'll just say I really appreciated the experience of the meditation this morning, focusing on joy and feeling that in the body, and felt that sense of effortless effort. And I think that was my favorite part of the whole intensive so far. It was really wonderful. So I hope I'll be taking that into this whole framework.
Oh, lovely. Happy to hear that.
So I have a question.
You didn't hear what he said.
Yes, I did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I said I'm happy to hear that.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Let me just check and see.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I was just thinking about how when you are in hell realms, it's required a certain amount of faith that you can get out, that these things, that there is a way out, and that there will be a time when there will be effortless effort again. There will, and I think that's what has motivated me. I spent years not thinking that I had faith, but somehow always trying to get out of hell. And I know when I look back on that, I think that's so interesting that I thought that there might be some way out, and believed that I didn't have faith. But in fact, it is faith that keeps us. And I don't see that on our factors of awakening, but I feel like it's a really important thing, that relying on the fact that tomorrow it will be different, or at least can be different.
Faith is a huge one, and it shows up in lots of places, but it doesn't happen to show up on this particular grouping of lists. Yeah.
It's the
I like
antidote
the,
to doubt, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I like the idea that
Let me just.
I'm just gonna say, I started reading this book with my partner on couples that argue well, basically, and the first point that's made in the book is there's a tendency where you can get your system can get energized or activated to the point where you're interested and you're investigating things, but it can get so activated that what you want to do is get away from the activation. It's like too much energy. And I had an argument with her several days previously, and I just remember looking back on it, how things could have gone differently if I was mindful of my energy level, and then it could have just been this flow of oh yeah, I notice my energy, I notice I want to get out of this situation. She had said something that I took as sort of an accusation, and I really didn't like being accused. I don't like personal criticism, and so I just wanted to get out of it so badly, but I was not mindful of that. And so it's I can just look back on it and see how if I had been mindful of and investigated the energy, how it could have turned into the downslope flow easily, and instead I was just fighting against the waterfall, and it's just interesting, if I focus on the energy in my body, that's sort of the point at which either it can I can pull the pin out of the circle, the DO circle, and suddenly what was craving can become sort of relaxation and equanimity pretty easily. It's just very interesting how it's and it all starts with mindfulness, which I forget so much of the time.
Thank you. Lovely share. Robert, you had a question.
Oh, it's similar to what he was saying, but it was something about what Renee was saying too. When you were talking about desire and it was a sexual thing, and it was and you were talking, and it became maybe this is covering up something else for you. So on the desire, you have mindfulness, which of course would come first on all these things, and then investigation. But when you investigate further, I mean, because that's what you were doing, weren't you? Trying to figure out why this was happening? And then you said there's another way to do it. It sounded like investigation got him deeper in the hole. Was it?
I was just trying to like say that sometimes it's confusing the unwise attention versus mindfulness in that instance, because it's like
Right.
paying attention to the state itself feels like it's keeping it going.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So investigating would be.
But
keeping
then
it
I
going.
think the investigation is like, oh, what is underneath?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to
That
get to
kind
that
of-
point, though.
right.
You have to get to where what is underneath.
Mm-hmm.
So do you get to that by first investigating and?
Well, with each of us, we have our own pathways.
Yeah.
And so what can happen is that when you begin to recognize that this whole thing around desire is a shadow result
Mm-hmm.
of something else.
Yeah.
So that becomes familiar.
Yeah.
So even though you can't see it directly, there's just a familiarity of it, that when I feel this amorphous wanting,
Mm.
then I know that there's actually something in the field that's having me feel scared. I don't have a clue what it is, but I just remember that that's the pattern.
Okay.
And so then the curiosity could be is to see if, is there something that I can notice that's happening here where I'm starting to pull back away and do this whole desire thing, because desire thing is my go-to when I'm feeling scared.
So you have so you have your prescription. You know
That's right.
that you're
That's right. That's
gotta
right.
do something different. Yeah.
Bev, you had a question.
Oh, I want to just make a point that I love the idea of the portals. That really appeals to me. I can see that and go to nature like you, or ocean, relationships. There's access points.
Yes,
I
yes,
really like
that's
that.
exactly right. There's
Portal.
access points. Yeah,
Portal.
yeah.
But I think you might also say that experiencing joy gets you closer to some sort of portal for these positive experiences.
Yes, so joy is one of the things where it starts to be a waterfall. You know, a lot of stuff coalesces around it.
Another
Oh, awesome!
over here.
Yay!
A foot. She's raising her
What
foot.
about guided imagery into luminous awareness?
So guided stuff is good.
I love it.
Sometimes people really find that really, really helpful.
I do.
But what can be also helpful is that when we learn how to get there ourselves. So because when you need to listen to somebody guiding you, then there's still this reliance on something outside.
What if I just did it for myself?
Well, totally. If you can do it for yourself, then that's
Yeah,
great.
I can guide myself.
That's right. That's great.
Sometimes that's hard to do though, because
It
you're in
is
the
hard.
middle of it, you're in the hell realm already.
Yeah.
But not done, because depending on where you're at, like, my health has been all over the map for decades now, and when my energy is low and I'm going through rough stuff, I don't have the capacity to guide myself. So
Right, yeah.
when I'm feeling better, I do my own recordings.
Hmm.
So I do my own guided things that are specific to what I'm dealing with, so that when I'm not able to do it, I can listen to my own.
Mhm.
And it's great.
This is something that I was talking to Michael Patty about this morning, and that is that when I used to go see Hindu teachers, we had there were deities, and you can give something to a deity, and I mean, you can give something to your higher self, or you can give away something that doesn't feel good, and so something that scares the crap out of me, I can just hand it over. And so if there's anything that appeals to you, you can just use it and dump in it, like because it can take everything, right? And I really like this when this idea of I can just take this and dump this somewhere. It doesn't even matter, and especially on a deity that can totally take it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
find this a very appealing idea. How their status or whatever is of little importance, right? Like how believable or whatever, it doesn't, I'm a very skeptical person, and I don't even seem to have a problem with it. I can just unload it, and I find that a very helpful thing to do. And I was going to something that you mentioned brought up something that happened that I thought that happened yesterday, and that was that I woke up and I felt this amorphous sense of sadness. And I noticed, it was a very quick thing, but what I noticed was I thought, oh, I don't want to be sad, and I brushed it aside. And then I went on with things, and then I thought, wait, what just happened? And I thought about it, and I thought, I just blew off my feelings. If anybody else did that, I would be crushed. I would think, wow, you are such a jerk, and how could you dismiss my feelings like that? And I just did it to myself. And so
We're our own worst enemies.
and so I invited that sadness back in. It was, come back. If I'm feeling sad, then I'm sorry I'm feeling sad. I'm sorry you're sad, and you can come on in. And I can't say that I became like super bubbly happy or anything, but things kind of like smoothed out, and I didn't feel ragged and I began to think back on times when, because then I began to think about, wow, I do this all the time, and how jagged it feels to do that, and that is the noticing, like, oh, there's this moment, and I make a decision, and it's so quick, and so there's no pomp and circumstance around it because I'm the one doing it. Like, if anybody else did it, I could freak out about it, but because I do it, I don't freak out about it. And so noticing it is like kind of this amazing thing.
That's brilliant, because we do this on all kinds of ways. Well, you're just talking about, dismissing a feeling. But, we slander ourselves. If somebody else did that to us, we would sue them for libel. We would take them to court and wrestle them to the ground. But we do it to ourselves all of the time, and we don't even notice it. So it's awesome that you're noticing, and that it's awesome that you welcome the sadness back, and that it becomes a priority to be present. Excellent. I think from our time schedule, we're needing to shift.
We are, because actually I made this mistake here. So this should be 2:50.
That's right.
And then that should be like 3:20.
So we're ready for another break.
No, we're actually gonna do.
Guided meditation.
Oh wait. We're gonna do.
Guided
We're
meditation.
gonna do a guided meditation, and then we're gonna do a break.
Okay,
It's
good.
just that the times got swapped.
Good.
What?
Could we have a little break?
Or we could do a
Yeah.
break
A
now.
break would be good.
We need
Let's
a
do a
break,
break.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. 15
No,
minute
please.
break.
Thank you.
So we'll be back at 3:05.